Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, when noblemen ruin perfectly good viz sources for no reason. The following recording was released into the public domain through the LibriVox project. Thanks again to all the LibriVoxians.
The Fairy Horn. Once upon a time, a knight was riding in the country beyond Gloucester, and came to a forest abounding in boars, stags, and every kind of wild beast. Now in a grovy lawn of this forest there was a little mount, rising in a point to the height of a man, on which knights and other hunters were used to ascend when fatigued with heat and thirst, to seek some relief. The nature of the place, for it is a fairy place, is such that whoever ascends the mount must leave his companions, and go quite alone. As a knight rode in the wood, and came nigh this fairy knoll, he met with a woodcutter, and questioned him about it. He must go thither alone, the woodcutter told him, and say, as if speaking to some other person, "I thirst." Immediately there would appear a cupbearer in a rich crimson dress, with a shining face, bearing in his stretched out hand a large horn, adorned with gold and gems, such as was the custom among the most ancient English. The cup was full of nectar, of an unknown but most delicious flavor, and when it was drunk, all heat and weariness fled from those who drank of it, so that they became ready to toil anew, instead of being tired from having toiled. Moreover, when the nectar was drunk, the cupbearer offered a towel to the drinker, to wipe his mouth with, and then having done this, he waited neither for a silver penny for his services, nor for any question to be asked. The knight laughed to himself when he heard this. Who, thought he, would be fool enough, having within his grasp such a drinking horn, ever to let it go again from him? Later, that very same day, as he rode back hot and tired and thirsty from his hunting, he bethought him of the fairy knoll and the fairy horn. Sending away his followers, he repaired thither and alone, and did as the woodcutter had told him. He ascended the little hill, and said in a bold voice, "I thirst." Instantly there appeared, as the woodcutter had foretold, a cupbearer in a crimson dress, bearing in his hand a drinking horn. The horn was richly beset with precious gems, and the knight was filled with envy at the sight of it. No sooner had he seized upon it and tasted of its delicious nectar, than he determined to make off with the horn. So having gotten the horn, and drunk of it every drop, instead of returning it to the cupbearer, as in good manners he should have done, he stepped down from the knoll, and rudely made off with it in his hand. But learn what fate overtook this knight. The good Earl of Gloucester, standing on the fairy knoll, when he heard of the wicked knight had destroyed the kind custom of the horn, attacked the robber in his stronghold, and forthright slew him, and carried off the horn. But alas, the earl did not return it to the fairy cupbearer, but gave it to his master and lord, King Henry the Elder. Since then you may stand all day at the fairy knoll, and many times cry, "I thirst," but you may not taste of the fairy horn.
And thanks to Ruth Lagorno for that reading. One of the limits of magic in Ars Magica is that magicians become fatigued while casting spells, and cannot use magic to repair their own fatigue. The best they can do is use fairy magic to shift their fatigue to other nearby people. This drinking horn, however, appears to cure fatigue, at least when used in the correct ritual context. Can Magi duplicate this effect? Can Magi start the custom again, and then build their covenant around this hill, so when they become fatigued, for example during a siege, they just run to the hill, say that they're thirsty, have a drink, and begin combat anew? Which King Henry this story refers to isn't clear. With regard to the Earl of Gloucester, in the Ars Magica period, the Earldom of Gloucester has had a bit of churn. Its holder from 1184 was Isabel of Gloucester, the daughter of the previous Earl. Then, when she married, the position of Earl was given to her husband, and then she was widowed and she married again, and it was given to her second husband, and then she held it in her own right for about a year, and then King John gave it to her nephew after her death. So Gilbert de Clare is the Earl of Gloucester at the moment. He's also the Earl of Hertford, so I'm not sure how much time he spends in his Gloucester domain. He's of interest with regard to the Cornish material that we've been developing on this podcast because his wife, who is another Isabel, went on to marry Richard Plantagenet, the Earl of Cornwall and King of the Romans, so she eventually becomes the Empress of Central Europe. De Clare was an odd one. He was on the side of Prince Louis of France when he nipped over in 1215, claimed the English crown, and then headed back to France claiming that he had never claimed the English crown, which was a strange sort of twist. During that war, he was captured by William Marshal, who was fighting on behalf of King John. Indeed, William Marshal is the reason we now call field marshals field marshals. They're named after him. De Clare must have been a pretty cunning one, because the Isabel I just mentioned is William Marshal's daughter. So he was part of the extended cluster of William Marshal's sons and sons-in-law which controlled the Welsh border, the Marcher lords who could, in their own areas, defy the king. So who has this horn? If the whole story is moved into the Ars Magica period, presumably it's held by King Henry III, and it's held in one of his treasuries, one of his secure places. Story guides wishing to use the Fair Maid of Brittany material about Corfe Castle in Tales of Mythic Europe may find it convenient for the horn to be stored there, but your saga may vary.